on the particular evidence presented to it, that the standards and conditions imposed in this title, if applicable, have been met by the applicant. Exceptional circumstances. There are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone. Practical difficulty and undue hardship. Because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of these regulations will result in practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of public purposes. Preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation of these regulations would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity, while a granting of the requested variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other properties in the same zone and the same vicinity. Minimum variance. The variance granted is the minimum variance required to make possible the reasonable use of the property. Absence of detriment. The authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest. Not of a general nature. The condition or situation of the specific piece of property or the intended use of said property for which variance is sought, one or the other or in combination, is not of so general or recurrent a nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such condition or situation. Any person, resident, or officer, department, or appointed body of the City of Athens, aggrieved by a decision of the Board, may petition the Athens County Court of Common Pleas concerning the illegality of the decision. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the decision of the Board to the applicant. Thank you. The first is for the property at 63 South Court Street, then for the property at 12 to 14 North Court Street, the property at 355 East State Street, and finally 28 South May Avenue. The Board is required to take testimony under oath. Would anyone wishing to speak concerning any item on the agenda please stand? Do you swear or affirm that any testimony that you will present to the Board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. So, case number 1, 63 South Court Street. Applicant is requesting a variance from Athens City Code 2310-01, Table B off-street parking to allow 20 remote parking spaces where 40 parking spaces are required. And this is a revision of a case that we had heard previously. Mr. Riggs, do you have?
Yeah, so typically, once the case is seen by the Board, you have to wait a year to come back unless it's been a substantial change. So one of the first things you'll have to decide as a Board is this a substantial change from the 0 parking requested? They're now asking for to allow 20 spaces where 40 are required. So one of the first things the Board will need to do is determine if this is a substantial or significant change to the permit that was denied, or for the BZA case that was denied previously.
So we need to address that right this second, pretty much?
You want to do that before you make a decision on the case, if that you want to see it or not.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and address that? Does anyone have an objection, or do you think that's a substantial enough change that we could revisit the case tonight?
Yes, I think it's substantial.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So the appellant or his representative, his or her representative, please come to the podium. Please state your name and address for the record.
It's John Stevenson, RBC Architects, 131 State Street, Athens.
Thank you.
I guess first, before I get started, I wanted to make sure I brought some extra copies of the submission documents just in case anyone didn't have them. So does anyone need a copy? Or
probably are okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So as you stated, we're seeking a variance for 20 remote parking spaces in lieu of the 40 required. In your document package, you will also see the letter written from NML Investments, where we have a standing agreement to lease those parking spaces upon approval from the BZA, and the securing of the purchase of the property, which is also contingent upon the approval of the BZA. You'll see that basically the existing use of the building was obviously mercantile on the first floor previously from the bookstore, which is still the current goal would be to get a future retailer back in that space, so there would be no change of occupancy on the first floor. And then the drawings include the renovations to put the housing on the second and third floor of the building. Also on the, let's see, sheet SD 1.3, there's just an aerial map of the subject property to the parking spaces that can be obtained in a lease agreement for the property. All of the units are either efficiency or single bedroom units. There's not a single 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4 or 5-bedroom apartment in the building currently on the drawings, and there's no plan to do so. My client strictly chooses to do single bedroom and efficiency units in this building. There's also elevations showing where the exterior of the building will continue to be the same as it has been, minus a sign that says a different entity where the bookstore entity was in the future, and for the entryways to the apartments. But the facade of the building will stay as is. There's no changes to that, so the historical preservation of that building will remain. I guess to just give you a little bit of additional information on the remoteness of the parking, I think most of you are probably aware of where the parking spots are, but they're on Union Street at 190 West Union, which is approximately 2,300 feet from the building site itself. We have looked into, possibilities of additional items, being able to get parking on site. Very difficult. Major structural changes to the building would need additional ingress and exit, which would potentially take city parking spots to give us curb cuts to even attempt to provide parking at the building. There's landlocked completely. Property lines are the building walls, no alley access, no type of entryways other than to get it from the city streets. Think of and the minimum variance that we are requesting is the 20 spots for the 20 units that will be single occupant units, and then of course the variance for the remoteness of the parking spots in lieu of being on site. I think that's all
Great, thank you. Questions for the appellant?
How many beds total?
20.
20.
And when you
20,
say
20 beds or 20 spots? You said beds?
Beds.
Yeah, those are single
Beds.
bedroom and
Okay.
efficiency apartments, and there's 20 units.
so when you say single occupant units, couldn't 2 people share a unit?
I guess that it would be possible that there could be some married couple or something that could be interested in having a single bedroom unit.
Okay.
Possibly even an unmarried couple.
Sure. Yeah. Fair.
So a question that I have about having discounted the possibility of building the parking there. So it would be possible. You're saying that the disadvantage would be that it would would use up a few city parking places, but it would be theoretically possible to build parking below the building?
You get into more factors than just it being possible, I think, and not just the city parking spots, but to develop the building to be able to get down into the basement of the building, which is approximately 14 feet in height difference between street level and the bottom floor of the building. You would use up more potential parking spaces in the basement, getting driveways in and out to upper level, to even have parking spots down in the basement once you were in the area, down in the basement. Second of all, the amount of structural changes and changes to the building would not only change the appearance of the building, but would also basically be the same value or more to make that type of project, of the building itself, to make that project take place.
Okay. Another question I had is that I understand that the building is owned by the Masons, the Masonic Lodge?
Correct. It's currently owned. There's a purchase agreement with Student Rentals Incorporated to purchase the building.
Has there been any thought given to providing parking at the Masonic Lodge, where they have added an additional parking lot not too long ago?
The initial thought was that was not the intent for them to put the parking lot in, was for rental spaces. They need the parking themselves for their own events and different things, to allocate their new parking lot to other outsides would then, kind of eliminate the reason they did what they did with their new parking lot for their own use.
Okay. Any other questions? Parking is really up in the air right now in Athens. And I expect we'll be seeing more cases like this, but it's kind of hard to decide these things when there are so many questions about where we're going to go. So I guess, is there anyone, you can be seated, thank you. Is there anyone who is interested in speaking in favor of this variance? Anyone interested in speaking in general comment? Anyone wishing to oppose the variance? Yes. Please come to the podium, state your name and address. Thank you.
Most of you probably know me, but for those of you that don't, my name's John Wharton. I'm the past president of the Uptown Business Owners Association for like 10 years because nobody else would do it. And during my presidency, the merchants uptown, the continual concern they had was parking. The number of parking spaces that were dedicated on Union Street to food buggies, the number of parking spaces that were dedicated to commercial trucks to load and unload for the extended period of time that it was every day, it seemed like, right in front of their business. The free parking the city gave during Christmas break to encourage shopping, which unfortunately ended up being employees of businesses or the university would park on Court Street, and there was no parking for their customers. So that's why the city actually did away with that and gave free parking in the city parking garage, okay, to try to encourage parking close to the businesses. I think I can speak probably better than anybody in this room as to student rentals. In all due respect to Mr. DeLuca, I'm a lot older than him. I've been doing this for 41 years. There is a higher percentage of students today that own cars than ever. Whether that's right or wrong is irrelevant. That's reality, okay? And they want parking. And if there is no parking on site for those tenants, whether there's 20 of them or 40 of them, and there could be 40 if it's a 120 square foot bedroom, eventually you could just have 2 people there, okay? But whether it's 20 or 40, you have to have some place for them to unload groceries, because they're going to go to Kroger or someplace. They're going to buy their groceries in the evening, typically. Come and unload them, park on Court Street or Union Street. And they say, well, they're not giving out tickets now, so I'll move my car in the morning. Morning ends up being noon, okay? And the car is still there. I see it on Court Street at my office constantly, okay? Cars that are ticketed because, not every day, but a lot, okay? I have a sincere interest in seeing this building being developed, and it will be. I think there's the misconception by some people that if we turn down this variance, we missed our bite at the apple. It's never going to happen. And that's not the case. When you have a property that you don't need, you put it for sale. I'm in the real estate business. You know, you have an asking price. If it's not met, you end up reducing it until eventually you come to terms with somebody. Part of the price that you pay has got to be contingent upon what it's going to cost you to develop the building for your intended use. And I think somebody on the board had mentioned back 2 months ago that they hated to see parking cost be added to their rent. And that's not the way it works. It works backwards. You subtract the cost of developing property and the parking in the property, if it's on site, from what you're willing to pay for the property. So they initially put the property on the market for $3 million minimum bid. Well, nobody bid $3 million. So then they went the traditional route where they listed it. And somebody said, okay, I'll pay you $2.8 million. Well, I can't compete with stupid, okay? And that's stupid if you have to develop parking on site, okay? It's going to cost you a lot of money to develop parking in the basement or on street level, but it can be done. I used the same architectural firm, RVC, when I bought the Bronies building. The Bronies building at one time was Jones Buick Cadillac, later became the In-Town Body Shop. This building was originally built, as you'll see here, as a car dealership. 1915, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That enables parking to occur on site, the mere structure of the building. Now, would there be expense involved? Absolutely. You're cheating, you're flipping ahead to what else is in there, but that's okay. My intent was to show you that the comment was made that it's mercantile and that's what it was intended to be all along. Well, actually, it was intended as a car dealership, if you want to know the truth of it. Just like Jones Buick Cadillac, the Lamborn's building, which my son developed, which has parking on the main level, but it's hidden by the women's clothing store in front. So part of the building is parking, but you don't see the parking. It's behind the clothing store. This building is 8,300 square feet for 4 levels. If you had 20 parking spaces, you need 3,600 square feet of parking. Now, I guarantee you that I know that you eat up some of the square footage by having entry in and out and being able to turn around. I know. If you look in your packet, when I developed the Bronies building, in order to comply with parking, you have a picture of one of the pillars that was there, a concrete pillar that supported the concrete barriers going across that bore the load of the building. And the concrete pillars were too close together to comply with the parking requirements. So I had to get a structural engineer from RVC's recommendation out of Columbus to come down and say, okay, you're going to have to put in steel beams. Look at my steel beams. Okay? It was a big deal. Okay? But I had to do that to comply with parking. And you need on-site parking. Okay? We have developed, when I say we, myself, my wife, and my sons, not only the Jones Buick Cadillac building, which is now Brony's, but the Suttlebug building beside it, we had to put steel beams in there. My office at 82 North Court Street, and I had to comply with parking, okay? And there's parking on site as well as within 300 feet. I had to get a variance for parking I owned. I had to buy and develop 10 parking spaces and deed restrict them to that building. That was the variance I got, 300 feet instead of 250 feet. Not 10 times 250 feet, which is almost what their variance is requesting. We also did the 63 North Court Street building, which used to be the Blue Gator, which is now the Overhang, which at one time was also a car dealership. A good friend of mine, Pete Good, could tell you all this stuff, but Pete passed away. The Lamborn's building also was a car dealership at one time, which is now hosting Kismet. And then my son is just finishing up Court Street Coffee. And again, there is parking for those residents in the rear, okay? I think if you look through those 6 buildings I just named, we as a family take pride in it. What we do is attractive to the community. It enhances the community. It does not cause a problem for neighboring tenants or neighboring property owners. I would like to just real quickly walk through the 6 items that have to be proven to be granted a variance.
Okay,
The first
please be
being-
brief because you have been speaking for a while.
I'm sorry?
Please be brief because you have been speaking for a while.
Okay.
Thank you.
Practical difficulty. It says it has to be not physically possible. I just showed you that it can be done, okay? Exception of circumstance. You know, I will grant you that you have to wait for pedestrians and cars to go by to pull out. Just like across the street from this building, where the 10 West Union building is, there's a driveway, is 15 feet wide. You're not taking up 3 or 4 parking spaces, you're taking up 1, okay? Preservation of equal property rights. They say that somebody's been granted a variance for no parking. Tell me who. Who has been granted a variance with no parking? I can't find one. None, okay? Minimal variance. There's two things they're requesting, distance and leased. They don't want to own it and they're leasing it. David will tell you, I talked at a planning commission meeting here about the proposed parking changes. Their office is not staffed adequately to follow leased parking. So they can't follow it. To have leased parking is like having no parking, let alone 2,300 feet away, okay? Absence of detriment. I'll skip over that one and I'll, for the sake of brevity, skip the last one. I guess the one thing I would say in summary is I think the board's responsibility is to grant variances that will balance the benefit to the community as well as the use of the building. I don't know how, this building's going to be developed, okay? But we're not here to maximize profits for the current owner. So that's not the purpose. If it takes $1 million to develop on-site parking, then pay $1.8 million, not $2.8 million. And the last thing that you have in there is the article that I got from the Columbus Dispatch, which discussed a development proposed around the campus of Ohio State. And 2 years, they came back and came back and came back until a proposal was acceptable. All I'm saying is I want to see them develop it or somebody develop it. I just don't think this is the one that we need to settle for, where there's no parking under ownership, the lease parking is 2,300 feet away, and there's no parking on site. None of those things make sense for the merchants in the uptown area. Thank you.
Wait, are we allowed to talk to him?
Yes.
Can we ask him a question?
I want to ask you a couple of questions, if you don't mind coming back.
No problem.
Thank you. One thing that I have trouble with is the statement that all the students are coming here with cars, because I'd like to see documentation of that, because I'm.
I didn't say all of them. I said a
No.
higher percentage of them now, more so than ever.
Because I'm hearing otherwise.
Well, all I know is I rent to 800 of them, okay? I rent to 800 of them every year. And so I don't know who you interact with, but I can tell you we interact with 800 of them a year. And I know how crucial parking, we lease parking faster than unbelievable. So my opinion is more of them have cars now than ever, okay?
My other question, I guess, is that, you are talking about how you have made great efforts to comply with code and providing, building parking under your buildings and so on. But, if council does go ahead and change the parking code, everyone who did comply with the previous code is just going to have to live with that.
If you're referencing the planning commission's proposal, I will be totally surprised if they grant, or if that passes, when you're saying if you're within 1,500 feet of the public bus or the public transit, okay, basically, that means nobody's going to be required to have parking. So not only a new development won't need to, but current property will not need to either. It says without a parking study. Well, you're just headed for court if you try to make an existing property owner like myself or Mr. DeLuca or anybody else have to comply with a parking study that you haven't even defined. Who's going to do the study? What are the grounds? And why would we have to when somebody coming in to develop something new doesn't have to do anything except be within 1,500 feet of public transit? That's ridiculous. You talk about having a parking problem on Grosvenor, Franklin, Maplewood, Elmwood, you'll have a parking problem. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I have a question, sir. Would you consider this intersection a lot busier than the intersection near Brony's?
Oh, yeah,
north?
absolutely.
So it's a
Yeah.
lot busier with
Yeah,
foot traffic?
absolutely.
And having an egress out of that parking lot would possibly be dangerous?
Well, I mean, you're not going to come barreling out your driveway and not pay attention to pedestrians.
Students
I mean,
would.
They right across the street,
Okay.
at 10 West Union, they have a driveway that goes back for parking,
Yes.
and they go in and out. I haven't heard of any student deaths,
Okay.
broken legs, or car accidents there. Now, if there's been any, they ain't been in the paper. Okay? So yeah, you'll have to use caution going in and out, but it's not like they're going in and out with their car 5 or 6 times a day.
Yes, sir. Okay. And I have a question for the code office, too.
Okay.
So-
Thank you, Mr. Wharton.
Is it true that there are no grandfathered buildings on Court Street that have
No parking.
no parking?
I'd have to research that. I couldn't say that for certain either way. I'd have to research it.
Okay.
Can I answer that?
Yes, sir.
There's been no buildings granted a variance with no parking. There have been grandfathered buildings, but nobody's been granted a variance with no parking. I've researched it, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton.
So a question for the city, far as cutting a curve out with the meters, would that even be possible?
Yeah, that's possible to do, as the appellant said, that you'd lose a couple of parking spaces on street in order to do that. At least 2, I would say, yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to the variance? Okay, the appellant may return to make concluding remarks or address the remarks that were just made.
Just a couple of addressing remarks that were made. A couple of the subject properties that were discussed, mainly the corner of Court Street at the Brony's location. Building is already elevated in the rear of the building, and there is a alley access at that area, and there was already some condition of existing accessible parking in that building prior to modifications for additional parking. This building would be much more of an undertaking to attempt to even get below the building. As I said, you would have to make entrances that would go down approximately 14 feet in height, which takes quite a bit of footage to get down, which would not allow you to then serpentine back around and come out at the similar entry points. You would need one entrance on Union, an exit on Court, and I don't know the exact footage, but with the width of the building facing Court Street, putting an entryway out that side would put you turning out at the red light, which would then cause some major congestion at the highly foot traffic intersection because of the how close it is in proximity to the stop lines for the red lights. Would be a pretty dangerous situation.
I got a question about, is it possible to even cut the square footage of the first floor retail and put anything just on the first floor?
You would still be into a similar situation, or if you took a portion thereof and tried to make enough for 20 spots and drive lanes for 2 directions, you would not obtain very many parking spots as well. And like he made a point to of how much the cost of that work is, and with the structure of this building, it's concrete columns and beams that are in some spans with clay tile supporting slab work, and the structural changes would be very, very dramatic and very, very costly, and well above $1 million or $2 million to complete that work to even try to make it happen.
You haven't bought the building yet, have they? They haven't bought, they're
There
just
is a
seeing
purchase
it.
agreement in place for the
This is gonna
property.
float, and then,
There's nothing else closer, like no other options closer. We done had plenty of cases come in and same situation, and people trying to park down at the fairgrounds, and it's the
Yeah,
same
we've had some
situation.
previous cases where that was a part of the variance was for their parking off-site to be at the fairgrounds location. And this is halfway or maybe close to 2/3 of the way to the fairgrounds from town versus being all the way at the fairgrounds. One other thing that, just a little rebuttal on the comment is that, lease parking, but then he made the statement of he leases parking. So at some point, one way or the other, there's leasing of parking. It's all not owned by either himself or whomever is leasing the spots for him for other locations.
Anything else for your comment? I don't want this to turn into a back and forth between two.
It's a statement of facts. There is no alley behind Ronnie's.
Yeah, okay. I feel that we have the information that we need to make a decision, and I appreciate both of you
Thank you.
expressing your views. Thank you. Okay, at this point, I'm closing discussion. And let's have a motion for the variance, and then we'll go through the findings.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
You'd want to do 2 motions. The first one would, my suggestion, one would be that this is a significant change and you would like to see the case or not. And then the second one would be to actually vote on the case itself.
oh, okay. So it wasn't enough to just
Yeah, you actually
nod
have
at
to
each other?
decide that this is a significant change to the previous denied permit.
Okay, so we need to vote on that?
Yes.
Okay. And should that be part of the motion for the variance, or just a first?
It's
first
separate, that should be
preliminary
a separate decision.
step? Okay. But not a motion, can we just do it?
Yeah, it does need to be a motion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it seemed that there was agreement that this was a substantial enough change that we could consider this case in less than a year from when it was first presented. So let's vote to see if we agree with that we should hear the case and consider the case. Please raise your hand if you agree with that. Okay. Is that good? Thank you. Who can do a motion for the variance?
I can do it.
Okay.
I move to grant a variance to the property at 63 South Court Street from ACC 231001, Table B, off-street parking, to allow 20 deed-restricted remote parking spaces at 190 West Union Street, where 40 spaces are required.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, let me find my findings. And we'll go through the findings.
Should that also include a statement about the distance of the parking?
Well, I was thinking about that, but because it's 190 West Union, anyone could look it up.
It's in there. In other words.
Okay. Exceptional circumstances. Are there exceptional circumstances pertaining to this property that suggest we should grant a variance from the parking requirement?
Yes, there's nothing around there that could, it's at a very, very busy corner, probably the busiest corner in Athens. And there's nothing leading into it. So anyone in the building is not gonna have any way to get out, nowhere to park.
I would agree with that. It seems like practical difficulty and undue hardship would be pretty much the same as exceptional circumstances regarding this particular variance. With it being said that this question of less parking is a very important one, and it's something that is obviously going to be addressed over the next couple of years in a lot of situations. Preservation of equal property rights. Does a literal interpretation of the regulations deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and same vicinity? And will granting a variance not confer on the applicant any special privilege denied to other properties? Well, it's been argued that it certainly does grant a privilege
Yep.
Yes,
that is not enjoyed by all
yes.
residents of that same
That
area.
came up
But
at the
like-
last meeting. Some of the other property owners spoke up on the
Yeah.
Zoom call.
It's like Mr. Wharton said, the intended use of the building should be considered.
Yeah.
Uh,
We had other building owners going through the same situation in the past. They brought that up.
Although we are finding that buildings intended for various uses are standing empty,
Yes.
including the apartments on Carpenter and Grosvenor, which we granted a variance for some years ago, and there still is no business on the ground floor level. There never has been. There are a couple stories of apartments there, so we may be seeing more of that.
Yeah, so for me, I would say in some cases, yes, some people would suffer if we granted this. On the other hand, we have granted similar kinds of variances, so it sort of nets out to,
I agree.
yeah.
Yeah. But they provided parking around that building though. On Carpenter Grove, and there's parking around that.
That's
building.
true. That's true.
It is parking around. I was driving around looking at different structures over the past 4 or 5 years that, got variance. And
Yeah.
most of them found
That's
parking
true.
near or on site. But they do have parking around the side of the building.
That's really very true, but of course, yeah, they had that space available to them. But it
Yep.
is the case that we're gonna see more development of upper stories
Yep.
into residences.
Yep.
And it seems to be a difficulty to find tenants for the lower stories in many cases. Is this a minimum variance required to make possible reasonable use of the property? Opinions will vary.
Yeah, the footprint's not going to change. The historic exterior will largely remain as it is. That feels somewhat minimum.
I think the 20 spaces seems like a minimum variance to me. So I think that's a reasonable request versus 40 that are required.
Or the zero that we first
0, yeah.
suggested, yeah.
Yeah, or, right, more than 0, less than 40,
That's
it's a nice happy medium in that respect, I think.
Would authorizing this variance be of substantial detriment to adjacent property? Will it materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest? Opinions will vary. I mean, some
Opinions
are
will vary.
arguing that there will be a parking crisis, and Others are saying that our parking requirement is too onerous as it is.
I think one thing that's happened, even in this discussion, is that the mixing of the discussion about on-street parking versus off-street parking, they're not really the same thing at all. And while I agree maybe a little bit with some of the statements today, that some students will have to use temporary parking on street to be able to offload groceries and things, leaving their car and getting ticketed every night is not going to happen. And I don't see where that's going to really impact parking in Uptown.
Unless there are 2 people in each of these 20 rooms, or 3 people in 20
Friends
of these
visiting
rooms.
from out of town.
That's what we don't know. That's,
Right.
But my other point, I think, is that that the assumption that every student comes with a car is not correct either, and Lisa talked about that a little bit. I think one reason Mr. Wharton probably is finding a lot of students coming to him because he has parking available. So he's got probably a good situation where he can lure students that need parking. But not every student needs parking, and I think this property owner could potentially lure different students, and I think that's a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, thank you. What was I going to say? Well, not of a general nature. Is the condition of a general nature? Again, I think opinions could vary, but, yeah, it can certainly be argued. Any thoughts about that? You're saying no, not of a general nature?
Not enough.
Because of the condition of the building and just the location of the building and so on?
Yeah.
It's a historic structure, and
Yeah.
you don't want to maintain that.
It's kind of landlocked. You can't really do much more when it's there.
Okay, I guess we're ready to vote then. And we want to vote en bloc. So we'll say, yeah.
We do? Oh, yeah.
I think so. So all in favor of granting this variance to require only the 20 spaces at some distance, please raise your right hand. All opposed? So 3-2? Where'd it go? Oh. Oh, there you are. Okay, you have your variance. Thank you. Thank you. Case number 2 is for the property of 12 and 14 North Court Street. And where the appellant is requesting a variance from Athens City Code 231001, Table B, off-street parking, to allow 8 remote parking spaces. Man, everyone's leaving.
That was the exciting one, I
I
guess.
guess so. So, Mr. Riggs,
Yeah, so this is an old structure that originally had rental units or residences on the second floor. And no parking was required as it was grandfathered in from long history. They decided to request to make some changes to add an additional unit upstairs. That voids their grandfathering, so they need to come to see you for a variance for that.
So, clarification on that, so is it the change that needs to be reviewed, or is it the entire parking
The
requirement?
entire structure needs to be reviewed. Yeah.
Okay.
But the structure
So both floors, so-
because it's been changed of usage.
Yep.
So it changed the grandfather.
And how do you get to the 8 required parking spaces? What's the math on that?
Oh, it's a number of occupants in the building. For
Okay.
residential, because this is in B2D, there's none required for the business portion of it. No parking required for the
Right.
business portion.
So
the-
even though they're 5 bedrooms, Mr. DeLuca must be asking for 7 or 8 occupants?
Yeah.
So,
Ah,
yeah,
ah.
so the old one that was grandfathered in now needs parking,
Yes, plus
Okay,
the new
plus the
one.
new one.
It's the same use.
Got it.
Okay, so what's the requirement then for the 5-bedroom addition? What's the parking
Yeah, go ahead.
We
requirement?
can come up, just come up.
Once you're, yeah, I'm the same person for this.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, are you going to speak to this then? Can you state your name and address again, please?
It's John Stevenson with RVC Architects, 131 West State Street, Athens. So as Mr. Riggs stated, there is current residence on the floor, which is a 2-bedroom unit that has been previously occupancy for 3 occupants. And so that requires 3 parking spots because once you're above 2 bedrooms, it's required 1 per bedroom. So then the 5-bedroom apartment that we are trying to start the project on would then require 5 additional spots. The difference in this variance request versus the previous one is this one is only a variance request for the distance to have remote parking instead of on site. The parking would be at a property owned by the same property owner. However, it would be, where is my link here? It's about, I think, 1,600 feet from the property. In lieu of the 250 required.
Okay.
So with the 3 people that's already there, they're not required to have parking, but do they lease parking? Bonnie, do they lease any parking, the 3 tenants that's there now? Even though they're not required,
They are leasing at Secure, which is right next door.
which is available to them as an option, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel as though if Mr. DeLuca is going to speak, he probably should come up to the podium. But you don't have to do that right now. I mean, it's just up to you. But just for the record, it's better to have someone on camera and so on. So my question, so this was postponed. We didn't hear this at all before.
Correct.
But we were going to hear it last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And you wanted the full panel. So my only question is, I guess that work has begun on the parking lot, but I don't know that we can grant a variance until that's completed and there is, the parking is available. Can you
You
address
could choose
that?
to do that. You could also, you could choose to approve it pending the completion of the parking lot.
Construction of the apartments is also not begun, so there's still a good bit of time period for
Yeah.
design and state submission and all of those things that have to be dealt with before we could even begin construction on the apartment. So there should be plenty of time to achieve finishing the parking area prior to the space being occupied.
So would we need to make that part of the variance, or can we just kind of assume that everything will move along?
If you wanted to be safe, I would suggest that you include that in your recommendation for denial or approval, or for approval, that the parking lot be completed before occupancy.
Okay, before occupancy of the apartments.
You've got 5 spots behind there by the kitchens, right? Those 5 parking spots.
There's like 4 that they've been used up by the businesses right now.
I said he had to come up to the podium.
Yeah, you need to.
Yeah.
Mr. DeLuca. Could you
Questions in
state,
the back row, so I'm just trying to answer them as I get them, I
can
guess.
you state your name and address,
Dan
please?
DeLuca, 15 Dove Drive, Athens,
Thank you.
Ohio.
So you were asking,
Oh, about the parking spaces in the back, they're for
Yeah,
the
they're
restaurant.
currently the business, the current businesses are there for those spaces there.
okay.
Okay.
Any questions for Mr. DeLuca?
I just have a question. It might be a typo, but on the June 29th memo, whatever, it references that the parking will be at 17.5 Lancaster, but it's for 7 parking spaces. Should that be 8?
It should be 8.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Request a variance on the front page on June 30th.
okay.
So definitely 8.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for Mr. DeLuca? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I will ask if there is anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of a variance for this property. Anyone wishing to speak in general comment? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Okay, Mr. Stevenson, have you said everything that you want to say?
I believe so.
Okay, so let's go ahead and consider this. Does someone want to make a motion?
I make a motion. Make a motion to grant a variance for 1214 North Court Street requesting a variance for ACC 23.10.01, Table B, off-street parking to allow 8 remote parking spaces. I'd like to add that the variance cannot be approved until the 8 parking spaces are completed.
And can we say where? Can we give the address?
Yes, is it,
17 and a half South Lancaster?
was it?
17
17 and a half South Lancaster.
Excellent. Second?
I second.
Thank you. Okay. Are there exceptional circumstances applying to the property or its intended use that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone? Well, it's very similar to the last one, really.
Yes.
So the answer is yes and no.
But that one, but this one already has apartments in there already.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's already, the usage is already there.
Yep.
Would a literal enforcement of the regulation result in practical difficulty or undue hardship?
No.
Yes.
Yes. It would. Maybe, I should probably just read the whole thing out.
Yes.
It's not confusing. So we do not agree, or at least 3 of us do not agree we do agree that literal enforcement would result in practical difficulty.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it would, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Aaron agrees. Okay. Does the literal interpretation of these regulations apply the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and same vicinity? Not really, but it's a mess up there. I mean, it's.
Well, some have been grandfathered, some have had
Yeah.
variances, some have had to
This
provide
property
the
was
parking.
grandfathered, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was.
yeah,
A little of both.
okay. Is this the minimum variance to make reasonable use of the property?
Yes.
Yes.
Footprint doesn't change, the outside historic exterior remains nice.
Agreed.
And they're asking for the number of spaces they're required to
Yeah,
have, just
that's
not
true.
in
They're not
the
asking
same
for fewer
location.
spaces. What about authorizing the variance? Would that create a detriment? No one has said so. Yeah, I don't think so. And not of a general nature, it kind of is, but, you know, in that way that things are, right? Okay. Are we ready to vote? All in favor of granting the variance, please raise your right hand. Okay? And no opposed. Just, can I ask you a question before you go?
Yeah.
This is the Red Brick Tavern built?
Yeah.
Is that, what's going on with the crack in the building or whatever?
Oh, that was, well, you can answer that.
It's all taken care of?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Okay. We're doing that outside facade and kind of getting old.
Yeah, they had a structural engineer,
Yeah.
that two different structural engineers that looked at it, and certified that it was safe, and,
Yeah.
and they did the right thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Case number 3 at 355 East State Street. The appellant is requesting a variance from Athens City Code 230407A3 to allow an eating and drinking establishment permitted within 114 feet where 200 feet is required when it abuts an R1 or R2 zone. Oh, someone's ready to talk. But let's just ask Mr. Riggs if he,
Yeah, so this is that section of the code that says that eating and drinking establishments, drive-in, drive-throughs, and eating and drinking places are permitted in a B3, provided that they're at least 200 feet, the main building is at least 200 feet from any R1 or R2 zone, and in this case, it's 114 feet, so it just misses that.
so this is very similar to the Dr. May's Thai Kitchen.
Yes.
Okay. The appellant's representative, please.
Richard Schultz, and my address is 41228 Gibson Ridge Road, Albany, Ohio, 45710.
Thank you. So, I'm really confused because I thought Kaiser's was going to have like a food truck or something. But this is the,
It's gonna be both.
oh, it's going to be
Food truck is
both.
bought, yeah, we're looking for a bricks and mortar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So go ahead and tell us about the project.
So this project obviously is the old VFW, which was listed as a social fraternal organization under the code. And, you know, they had a large kitchen, large dining area. The amount of parking that they had complies with what Sean plans on doing as far as seating, and so we have no issue with parking. It'll be a family-type restaurant. It's obviously right next to, it's on East State Street, the main thoroughfare. It's next to Bob Evans, next to the motel. And so we feel that it fits the location.
Questions?
There's no real residences around there. You've got the lawyer's office across the street from you, right? And then maybe a few guys down the alley, a few apartments.
One house.
As you get further
One house.
past the commercial building on the corner, you start picking up a few houses
Yeah.
as you head down towards.
And we're counting the house, not Putnam Square, correct? We're
Yes.
counting the distance to that first house on the corner of the alley and Home Street.
That's a good point. Other questions?
So you said family dining establishments, does that mean alcohol will be served or will not?
Sean can answer that.
There's
They
no
have a
intention to do that right now.
Sean, please give your name and address.
Sean Kaiser, 105 Winter Hills Drive, Athens, Ohio.
Thank you.
There's no interest in doing alcohol at this time.
And at your previous location, you did not serve alcohol, is that right?
Correct. It was down at the mall, yeah. We did it one time, I'm sorry. We did it one time, obtain an alcohol license there. Didn't do too well with selling it, so we let it go.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Will you have the gun up front?
I know, we have
I think somebody stole it. It's not there anymore.
What?
Oh, the
Yeah.
gun was moved, the cannon.
The
The
gun
cannon.
was moved, okay,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know who took possession of it, but
Yeah.
it's been gone a long time.
I think there was a story in the A News that it suddenly disappeared, but I may be
Yes.
wrong. I don't think I recall.
Boy.
Okay. Any other questions?
The previous location there, they had a kitchen in there. Because I remember going to some of the fundraisers they had there, so.
Yeah.
They was serving
Oh,
food.
you're talking about the veterans?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they were serving
They
food.
were serving
Yeah.
food out of
But
there.
because it was a
Yes.
club, it's
Yes.
considered different.
So I guess it wasn't really a restaurant necessarily, but it was a commercial kitchen at least then, right?
Yeah,
or
It was
something?
it was a large kitchen. We had
Yeah, you could see the vent hood coming out of the roof.
And
Yeah.
they did serve alcohol.
yeah, they had two
Right,
bars and a
okay.
large dining
And that
room.
was okay, obviously.
Oh, yeah, they
Yeah.
served a lot of alcohol.
Yeah, I don't know that that's within our, it doesn't seem to be relevant to the
Yeah,
question, really.
gotcha.
So just to clarify, that section of the code does not say restaurant, it says eating and drinking establishments.
Okay. Which restaurant is? Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Schultz?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Well, do I still have to ask if there's, well, this, she might have all kinds of things she wants to say. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the variance? Anyone wishing to speak in general comment? Anyone speaking to wish in opposition? No, she's not opposed. So I'm going to close the discussion from the floor, and are you ready to make a motion? Somebody?
I move to grant a variance to 355 East State Street, Zone B3, case 21-10B, requesting a variance from ACC 23.04.07, A3 to allow an eating and drinking establishment permitted with 114 feet where 200 feet is required when it abuts an R1 or R2 zone.
And I will second.
Thank you. Okay, are there exceptional circumstances applying to the property in question that do not apply? Yeah, I would argue that it's right there on that corner with all these other businesses that are long established.
And it's got a light now, too.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Practical difficulty or undue hardship? Yeah, I don't know.
It's been sitting there
Yeah, it's
vacant
been
for the
sitting there.
longest time.
It's nice that someone is going to make use of it. Preservation of equal property rights, is that an issue?
You have Bob Evans
Yeah.
being a similar business.
It's not quite as close, but it's out of the 200-foot zone, but, just down the street, there is at least one other example that must have been given a variance would be Village Bakery.
Yeah.
It's 60 feet from my
Okay.
measurement, at least, if that, from R1 zone, and that's on the same street, just in the B1 zone down the street. So at least there's one other example that must have been granted a variance to exist there. And so that's one example, at least, of a similar type of business.
Yeah, there certainly hasn't been, I mean, I think the neighborhoods are pleased to have those businesses there. They haven't been coming out to
Yeah.
complain about them.
Except for the pizza drivers.
Don't get me started. Is this the minimum variance required to make possible? Certainly to make possible, yeah. What other use is there?
Yep.
So, yeah. Mhm. Absence of detriment? I don't think there's any detriment been identified. And it's certainly
No
not.
no homeowners have stated any opposition, right? So that's the
right.
the real question. They haven't.
And in fact, when Dr. May's Thai Kitchen, there were actually people expressing interest in having a restaurant there. And it is definitely not of a general nature. We agree on that? All right, all in favor of granting the variance at 355 East State Street, please raise your right hand. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, boy.
You can wait a second. Okay, so our last case is at 28 South May Avenue, case 2111B. The appellant is requesting a variance from Athens City Code 230314 to allow a 0 front setback where 12 and a half feet setback is required. Mr. Riggs.
Yeah, so this actually is, I've been intending, and I haven't done it yet, to do a little FAQ on setbacks for corner lots, because that's what we have here. So because this address is on May Street, the front yard is the setback from May back. And then the second front yard, or the second main yard on Elmwood, is half of that distance that the front setback is. So the front setback is 25 feet. Here we're going to have half of that distance again. And the house actually sets just about on that setback. They're asking to go all the way to for you to allow them to go all the way to their property line. And then they may additionally ask to go and take some of the right-of-way as a special use of the right-of-way permit, which is going to would go to city council to go somewhere else. So this request is to have a basically a 0 foot setback. They'll go all the way to their property line on that Elmwood side of the road.
I feel like I understand it less since you.
Sorry, that's not what I wanted to hear. I'm sorry about that.
But that's the question I'll ask her, because I was feeling the same way.
Yeah, so it's
where's the gate going to be,
confusing,
on
yeah.
Elmwood, or is it going to be on May?
It's on Elmwood.
So the setback on Elmwood it has to be 12 and a half feet.
Okay.
And that's just about where the house is. So it's
Okay.
12 and a half feet from the house to their property line. They'd like to take the fence out at least to their property line and then farther into the right-of-way, which would be a separate permit. What we're looking at is just the piece that goes from their house out to the end of their property line on Elmwood, and then could run down Elmwood or extend past that. So basically they would have 0 setback on that
Okay.
second front yard.
So the right-of-way, so it's called a second front yard?
That's what I call it, yeah.
Okay. So the right-of-way is the place that's filled with bushes?
It is, yeah.
That's kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a big wide right-of-way there, both on Elmwood and on May. I think it's 50 or 60 feet.
Okay.
So it's pretty wide there. It goes quite a bit ways back from the curb onto it looks like they're people's lawns, but it's actually the city's public right-of-way.
Yeah, it was 6 feet, right, according to the diagram? 6 feet is where the
Should
property.
be more than
That's
that,
the
I
curb.
think, yeah.
And it's the red
It says
part.
proposed fence distance to curb is 6 feet.
Oh, yeah, so, yeah, but, yes. So it's
City
6 feet
right-of-way
from
is
the,
that
6
17
feet from the
feet?
curb to the
City
fence,
setback?
and then it goes farther back.
I think city setback, say Elmwood at 17 feet.
We were saying it should be 12 and a half feet, I
The
think.
setback is 12 and a half feet, which is about where the house is, the side of the house is.
Okay.
So the code office is saying that the fence should go along that line, and she's arguing that she wants to pull it out closer
The code says that she can't be any farther to that property line than the house is. She'd like
Yeah.
to go past that house.
Okay.
And that makes sense if you're gonna try to fence in your yard.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I didn't mean to make it more complicated, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. All right, the appellant may now approach the podium, please give your name and address, even though we know both of those.
Okay. Yes, my name is Michelle Jennings. Address is 28 South May Avenue, Athens, Ohio. Good evening.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. So, as you all have discussed, this is for a fence to be erected in the city right-of-way. And I have prepared for you all sort of a narrative, but I can just sort of give you the broad strokes, the highlights from that. Ostensibly, as was mentioned, there is a significant amount of mature landscaping in the city right-of-way. And so the goal here is to more or less follow the line of those bushes. And first and foremost, they don't exceed, well, they possibly exceed, I did not get the measuring tape out, but they're much higher than me, at 6 feet. So erecting a fence behind them would not change the sight lines along that part of the property. The second piece of that is, of course, constructing the fence along the house line would also kind of make it hard to manage the space between the mature landscaping and the fence. So that is sort of a practical hardship for us. I also included for you all some photos of other properties, some literally, actually two, literally right across the street from mine, which have 6 foot, 4 foot, I think, 4 or 5 foot, and then 1 6 foot directly across the street, again, running along Elmwood. There are also examples of similarly constructed fences running along Lincoln Street, which is just 1 block south. The other piece of this is that because this is running along Elmwood and not up towards the corner of Elmwood and of May Avenue, there is no detriment to pedestrian or vehicular thoroughfare. There is no obstruction of any sightlines.
How about the alley behind you there?
Yeah.
There's been an accident there.
Yeah, so it will completely be within our, we have a driveway, which there's maybe about 3 feet, our driveway, and so the fence would not even include the driveway. It would cut along the line of the garage, which is on your diagram there.
Would you have a door there to get in the garage, or?
We have a door on the yard side, not the alley side.
Gotcha.
So really, I think the main point here is the absence of detriment and the preservation of equal property rights for other neighbors in the area. And I am specifically requesting a 6 foot high and from the curb, but I'm requesting that much high, of course, to, for security for my dog. So.
Okay. Other questions for the appellant?
I have one for Mr. Riggs.
Oh,
The height of the fence is not at issue here, right?
Correct. If it's higher than 6 feet, then other things kick in. That's the way the code's set up. So if
Okay.
it's 6 feet or less,
Okay.
we're good.
Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. I have this right in front of me. I was able to obtain a copy of an easement that is on the property that was just done. Essentially, my neighbors along May Avenue. So the reason there's the diagram is from a surveyor is because the land was surveyed. And it was determined that the neighbor's fence to the north encroaches on the property. And so we're also kind of interested in pushing our fence over so that we can have full access to the property since some of it is encroached upon. So I have a copy of the easement if that would be useful.
How much are they encroaching on your property?
I believe about...
The couple we saw last time.
Yeah.
With the,
Probably.
The little.
I don't know.
Are we going to get in a big property line dispute?
I say, don't we just look at this, something similar, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I am trying to make
That's why I was like, I know we just looked at
1.3.
Yeah, that's right next to
this
us.
location.
They have the meditation
Oh, really?
thing.
Yeah.
So it's a little over a foot encroaching, and then there are some additional mature landscaping that we'll need to work with whatever, builder we
You're
go
gonna have
with.
them tear it down, the fence down? Over a foot?
Basically with the easement, we're not asking them to remove it.
Oh, okay.
So I can provide a copy of this if that
Would the
would be
trees stay there?
Yes.
That's the tree behind the garage.
It's the tree behind the garage, but there is a line.
I'm talking about the bushes where, on here with the bushes going down the property where the gate is.
Yes, yeah, so there are bushes going, pretty much running on both sides of the property, both on the encroaching fence and on the Elmwood side. So we would like to maintain, I mean, we'd like to maintain as much mature landscaping as we possibly can. Of course, in collaboration with whoever we go with to build the fence. But that's ultimately our goal. Okay, I will give you all a copy of the easement.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all I have for you.
So one thing that John mentioned was the sight line from the alley, and I didn't even think of it till I went by today, and I looked at it, I'm like, I wonder how much this 6-foot-high fence that's gonna be on the side of her driveway and then up to 6 feet from the curb would obstruct the view from people coming out of the alley to, can't see to the right very well. That did cross my mind, and it's hard to visualize that when you're standing there, but exactly how it would impact it is the problem.
10 to 12 feet.
Yeah, so it would be within the city setback along the alley, the 10 feet required. I'm not requesting a variance for that at all.
Right, but I'm still thinking that if somebody's pulling out of that alley,
Yep.
they're not gonna be able to see cars coming from the right very well.
Yep.
And the thing is I'm a bicyclist, I ride a bike most places, and you might recall a situation where Grant Street was converted from two-way to one-way because the sight lines were bad when it was redone. Across from the Sonic on Stimson. And a car pulling up to that can't see very well because the driver sits behind the front of the car back about 6-8 feet and can't really see because the car, they'd have to stick their nose into the road to be able to see at that situation. That's why it was made a one-way, is you can't do that anymore, can't go out that way anymore. The same kind of thing could happen here, is where somebody has to pull out into the street to be able to see around very well. On a bicycle, it's different though. You can pull up close enough and see what's going on. It's not an issue. But that nose of the car is a significant factor.
So you're saying
And
that,
your neighbors across the street have had their car hit there. It was an accident.
So
I talked to them this
if
morning.
it's a reason to not deny this, but
Well, no.
it's something I think that could become an issue.
you're talking
here.
about this part of the fence here?
Yes,
But
exactly.
if they pull up, I mean, the bushes also would obscure the sight to a degree, wouldn't they? I mean, if
They
you
might.
pull all the way up to the
They do.
corner, it
They
seems
do.
like they would,
Yeah.
There's
I
actually
know.
a very,
It didn't
very, very
seem-
tall shrub right on the corner,
Yeah.
like a
Didn't
very
seem to
large
me-
topiary, probably 20 feet,
I
very
didn't
large.
go into the alley, but
It didn't seem to me like they did obscure it very much, but they're a little bit of a factor. But I think the fence would be
So,
completely blocked.
If I could
Yeah.
just
Go ahead.
suggest, this is actually two pieces. What she's looking for is a variance to allow her to go up to the edge of her property. What we're talking about, what you guys are talking about is if she extends that into the right-of-way, is that gonna create a sight distance problem? That's actually gonna have to be approved, that right-of-way use is gonna have to be approved by city council.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk
Yeah.
to them about that.
And I mean, to go to the edge of your property, you trying to build the privacy fence past the garage?
No.
You
No.
Only
gonna
after the
stop
garage.
right at the garage?
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
yeah, because that's not our
Yeah.
bailiwick. Okay, yeah. Other questions for the appellant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just not even gonna say all that stuff about, it's okay, right?
I can say more in support of myself.
There's nobody here.
Okay, so let's have a motion.
I guess I'll try and do this. I haven't
Yeah.
done one of these before, so see if I get the wording
Yay.
right. So I make a motion to grant variance to the appellant at 28 South May Avenue. That's requesting a variance from ACC 2303.14 to allow a 0 front setback where 12.5 feet setback is required.
Thank you. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah, that was good. You didn't even have the cheat sheet. Are there exceptional circumstances applying to the property in question that would suggest we should grant the variance? I think all those bushes are a special circumstance. It would be completely different if there were not that,
Nothing there.
yeah,
Yes.
I think. Practical difficulty and undue hardship if we do not grant the variance? I think so. It would limit her use of her space.
Yep.
Preservation of equal property rights. That doesn't seem really relevant here. Is it the minimum variance
I
required?
guess it's, other people do have similar fences, similar.
Yeah, they do.
structures.
Sure.
Close to the edge of their property or the right-of-way. They may not be 6-foot tall fences though, but they do have fences,
Yeah,
like she said,
okay.
across the street even has one.
Go from like a 3-foot to a 6-foot white picket fence.
Yeah, and I think if you look down the street, the property across May from them, they have a 6-foot tall fence, at part of the, right up to the, probably the edge of the property.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
look down the street, and part of it is 6-foot tall, part of it's picket in the beginning, but then it
Okay.
goes to 6-foot tall, so there are other properties
Yeah,
that have
sure.
that same kind of,
I wonder if that's one of ours that we granted. Sounds familiar. Could we argue that this is the minimum variance required?
Yes.
I think so. Absence of detriment? The only concern that was raised was not really our issue to address, so.
Yes.
Yeah, and not of a general nature.
No.
No. Okay. All those who wish to approve the variance, please raise your right hand. Okay, thank you. Then our other business is, this question of minutes is really driving me crazy.
yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, and we have to decide like,
We had that special meeting.
yeah. So I'm gonna ask David, because I couldn't find, the stuff that John said about how you have to have 3 people that were present at the meeting to, what's the word?
Yes,
Approve.
yes.
I couldn't find that in the little thing about.
The bylaws?
Yeah, I couldn't even find it. So I don't know, but, if you go away, I didn't think you were gonna be here tonight.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I
Oh,
got this
yeah.
little thank you to you.
Oh, no,
Okay.
I'm here. Totally.
Until-
I can.
And I guess Kelly will, because Kelly Sauber, did you hear about Kelly Sauber?
What happened?
He's gonna be, he's been appointed.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, to replace John.
I thought something bad happened for
Yeah.
a second.
No,
Yeah, I know.
sorry. So David,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm confounded by, do you have something to say before I say anything
I
about
just want to
these?
know if you guys had any questions about this last case.
I don't think so. It was sort of weird.
It's weird because it's an island, right? So
Yeah.
what we would typically do is you look at the next door neighbors left and right of you on that side setback, and if they're already up there, then we wouldn't even be talking. And up
Okay.
here, we just approve it, but they're an island because of that alley back
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
She doesn't have any neighbors.
Yeah.
It's similar properties in our neighborhood too,
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
driveways. We had a question about the minutes before we end,
Yeah, yeah, okay.
tonight.
So do we really have to have people present to approve? Because I couldn't find that in the.
Because John's not here, and John sat on
So how
3
do
of
you
the cases.
approve minutes that you weren't at when you weren't at the meeting? How can, you can't do that, right?
Right.
I think,
So that's Robert's rules. You have to actually be
Okay.
be in the meeting to approve the minutes.
But it doesn't actually say in the thing that we have to vote on approving them. In the procedures of the BZA. Isn't that weird?
That is weird. I would fall back to Robert's rules where you do.
So we do. So do we need to, okay, for people, do we?
So who was present for the first meeting?
Okay, so.
June 1st.
I've got this
all of
somewhere.
us were.
Yes,
So the first one we can do, all
Yes.
5 of us were there.
because that was done via Zoom.
Except I did find an error in this, unless it's been changed. Somebody caught it already, and it's
I had a
being
question
changed,
about,
is the
like our
vote
first case.
at the
So
end.
if
Okay, so
you
Lisa
can,
Kay, Robert,
Oh, I
and
think I
Aaron.
mentioned that,
okay.
Carrie.
That
But-
it has
Yeah.
John as a yes and he was a no on the vote on the first minutes, the June 1st special meeting.
Yes,
Really?
and I was an
Oh.
alternate, so I didn't get to vote.
I
That
don't
was
think you
June
have to have
1st.
voted, do you? Do you have to have voted, David?
You just had to be
Just had to be
Yeah, I was
present.
present.
Okay.
So all five of us were there. The question then is whether or not the yes for John Golsey is corrected or not. We need to have it
Oh,
corrected.
okay, I'm sorry.
So at the very end.
That's for the June 1st?
June 1st, yep.
Okay.
Because the motion approved 3-2 is correct, but the yeses are 4 in this list. So
Oh,
John
okay.
voted against it. So with that change, do we need to make a motion to
Yeah.
adopt, or should we do them all together?
Okay, did you tell David about that?
I did not. I
Oh,
just saw
okay.
it this evening before the
Yeah, I
meeting.
told
so
Carrie about it.
Oh, you told Carrie?
Yeah.
Okay,
But
so-
I guess you need to.
When we pass the motion, we can just specify that change should be made, I think.
So you want to just do this tonight? Has everyone read them all?
Yeah?
Okay, good. Okay,
As long as we have enough people to do it, right, is the key?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
we need to go ahead and do it. And there's also the May 11th I have.
Oh,
I thought we
She
not
said-
voting on the May 11th in
Oh.
June?
oh, that is in here.
Yeah.
I didn't look at that one, I don't think.
You want us to come back? You want to just go through everything and get everything corrected and vote on the next meeting?
Do you think we should just do that? And everyone read
Or
them?
can we email it? Our
I think we
approval
should
to
try
you?
and get the ones done we can.
You
Get
do?
them out of the way, like that one we just talked about,
Okay.
June 1st, we can
Okay.
get rid of it.
So David,
Yes, ma'am.
it looks like we can vote, or we can take a vote on approving the minutes from June 1st, except there's an important correction that needs to be made.
Okay.
That John Golsey is listed as having voted yes when he actually voted no.
Yes, I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes,
And maybe Carrie already changed that.
we'll take care of it. Yep.
Okay. So then, do we have to move and do all that, or can we just,
We could probably do them together if there's
Oh,
more
okay,
than
that's
one.
a good
Is there
idea.
others we can do?
Lisa,
So-
John, there's no Joe, Aaron, and Robert, that's 4 of us.
So June 1st, we can,
June 1st, we will definitely
We
be
can
able
do,
to.
yes.
We can approve that.
Yeah.
so the question then is.
4 of us were here for the June 8th meeting.
Yes.
Is that enough?
That was the one that we just redid, so
Yeah.
that's one we just saw again today.
The Follett's building?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that one's.
That was the
one's
special
fine.
meeting.
We could approve that then.
So we could approve that. And July 13th? No,
I
that's
was
not
not here
good.
for that one.
There's like no one here. So if Joe, next time, Joe and Aaron and I can,
Yeah, that one's gonna have to
assuming that
wait.
Joe will be here.
That one
Okay,
has to wait, we need one more person, right, it sounds like.
yeah. And then what about this May 11th?
1, 2, 3, 4, we have 4 people here,
Okay.
and. this
So
one-
does someone want to move that we approve the meetings as amended from May 11th, June 1st, and June 8th?
I'll make that motion with that one correction we talked about,
Yeah.
where the no vote for John Golsey.
The no vote for
Should be
John.
no vote for John
Yes.
Golsey in the June 1st minutes.
And the May 11th with the, what's the, old LCR building? That was the LCR building? On East State Street,
Yep.
for the apartments,
oh.
for the apartments upstairs?
Yeah. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the May 11th, yes.
Okay,
And so we can approve that one as well. We have 4 people here from that, so.
okay. So all 3 of those then. Does someone second, do we have to second and do all that?
I think so.
I'll second.
Okay. So all of those wishing to approve the minutes from May 11th, June 1st as amended, and June 8th, raise your right hand.
I can do it except for the 8th when I wasn't here.
Oh, okay. But that's okay, because John was. Okay. So those minutes are approved.
Yay.
And let's see, special meeting, July 13th, we will address next time. And I haven't seen minutes from August 10th.
We don't have, Carrie Yake has resigned.
Yeah.
And I don't have a secretary at this point. She took a full-time job.
Yeah.
So I'm glad for her, but she's no longer our secretary, so
Yeah.
I'm in the process of looking for somebody new.
Wow.
Wow.
So she's still in Athens?
Yes,
Okay, good.
yeah. Not
Should-
for the city, but she still works in Athens, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Do I need to write some minutes up?
I'll take care of it.
Are you sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If you're sure, because I could do it.
Yeah.
You're just gonna watch the video and do it?
I'm gonna look at the video and take it from there.
Thank you. When do you think you'll have someone?
I hope really soon, temporary,
Yeah.
and then, because this is a part-time position, I don't have to go through the full testing and everything, so we can
Okay.
probably fill them in pretty quickly. We've been struggling trying to find staff, so.
Yeah.
No, no way.
Yeah, nobody else is, I know.
Actually, there is minutes for August 10th here. Is that what we're talking about, right?
Say again?
August 10th?
Yeah.
There are minutes here for August 10th.
Oh, there are? How
Yeah.
come I didn't see it?
Well, there's a lot of documents.
Okay, let's address, can we
So-
address that next time then? I have to
Yeah, we
read
could.
those, and then we'll look back at those other
Yeah,
ones.
and
I wasn't
Thank
here
you,
for
I
that
didn't
one.
realize.
We need Joe here.
Yeah,
to do
he'll
it.
be here, I think.
I wasn't here for that.
So we have to wait for that anyway, because
Okay.
Joe's not here. We only have Lisa and Kay.
Okay,
And so we need Joe to pass that one, so yeah, it has to wait anyway.
okay. So we'll do that. Thank you, David, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Lisa.
Oh,